This is a workshop, a strategy workshop that we discussed originally on August 23rd at the council meeting. And we have with us today members of our state officials. But we'll go through a roll call first to identify those who are on the council who are able to attend today. When we called this workshop, we knew that we would not have the majority of the council here, but we had to work within the time frame outlined by the state as far as introduction of LSRs, legislative service requests. Thank you. And so that's why we're here today. We're here to strategize how we can make the legislation that would impact Claremont in a positive way as most effective as possible. So, having said that, for the workshop, could you ask for the roll call, Ms. Russell?
Carolyn Toll, Scott Pope, Keith Raymond, Alan Damren.
Here.
Bruce Temple, Nick Glisklowski, John Simons, and Mayor Charlene Lovett.
Here. So, before we began the workshop, as a courtesy, is there anybody from the community who would like to say something first? Yes, Mr. Fulton.
Thanks. As I said, just for the television audience, this is not really a meeting because there's no quorum. And that's okay. I mean, I'm glad it's happening instead of people saying we're not going to meet. And I often throw bricks, or what I call hand grenades, from the streets, joining other people who do that. But I want to throw roses once in a while. And so I would like to single out Representative Francis Gauthier, from whom I receive informative emails about what he's working on, what he's watching, and also reference materials. I don't think he's got a huge list, and I'm sure he'd be willing to put any Claremont citizen who's interested in following his action on his list, I think. He just said yes. So I would just like to say kudos to you for your communications, a sign of a 21st century representative. Seems to me like you're engaged in a lot of hard work over there in Concord, and so
they're working 50 hours a week.
So I just wanted to say this citizen appreciates the hard work and the excellent communications. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, I apologize for this more formal venue because I would, like I said, this is meant to be informal strategy workshop. We're trying to make use of the time frame that you have to adhere with as far as the introduction of new LSRs, which I believe is over with on September 22nd. Is that correct?
That's the last day to file for an individual rep to file for the 2020 session.
Okay. For the television audience, if you could just briefly state your name. And before you do that, I know Senator Hennessey. Oh, she's here.
Walking in.
Yay. All right. So while she's taking her seat, if we could start with Representative Gagnon, just go down the line with your name, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Assistant Mayor. I'm assuming that Ms. Walters is sitting in for the city manager?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ray Gagnon. I'm representative from Ward 3 here in Claremont.
Thank you.
Francis Gauthier, Representative, Ward 1 here in Claremont.
Thank you.
Representative John Cloutier, I represent the entire city of Claremont in the New Hampshire House.
Thank you.
Martha Hennessey, I'm the state senator from District 5.
Thank you. On behalf of us here at the council, I would like to say thank you for taking your Friday afternoon to meet with us. I know everybody is busy and time is of the utmost. But we as I said before, the purpose of this meeting is to work together, collaborate, so that we can be the most effective possible during the legislative process. So what you have before you are 3 items. The first item, I'll just talk, it is outside of the state legislative process, but I wanted you as our state representatives to be aware of this, and that is, as you know, in Claremont several years ago, we had an incident at the high school that involved a minor, a student, and a teacher. Because of that incident and the willingness of the family to ensure that this never happened again in the state of New Hampshire, they, along with several of us from the community, spearheaded an effort to change the law. And that law dealt with the criminal investigation background check when a school hiring authority is in the process of potentially hiring somebody. They ask for a criminal history check, and in the past, the law only provided that certain felonies were reported. That since has been changed. However, the family also had wanted it, when the opportunity arose, if it did, to pursue this at the federal level, in that different states have different different laws with regard to criminal history checks. So that is currently being investigated by Congresswoman Custer's office, and I wanted to bring that to your attention. I don't know where that's going at this point, but I did hear from her DC staff that they are looking at what the other state laws are and how a more universal approach could be taken, much like the Amber Alert law. So that is for your information. The other piece of paper you have is a copy of those bills that I, along with other members of the community, whether it be from the school district or from the city administration, testified during the last legislative session. And those bills have been retained. During our August 23rd council meeting, we briefly discussed how we could go about ensuring that our positions were continued to be voiced at the committee level, because they've been retained in committee. They'll go back on to the floor for a House or Senate vote in January. So those are those bills, but that's only one part of today. It's really a 3-part session. And that is the third piece of paper you have, and that is, the first part is a strategy for retained bills. Number 2 is new LSRs and the strategy during the legislative process this upcoming season. And then 3, strategy for following legislation that impacts Claremont. I am somewhat familiar with what you have to do at the State House, as I was at the State House during 2011 and 12. And I know how much is going on once the legislative session kicks in, and I just want to make sure we have a comprehensive and cohesive effort, because power is in numbers, and we need to expand our efforts. So,
I'd like to ask a question and also tell you why I ask the question, and it involves just a tiny bit of background of the representatives.
Can we?
It'd be good to have this known up front. The question is, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to know what legislative committees the representatives are on. And the reason I ask the question is, I've not been a representative, but a lot of the work goes on in a committee before it goes to the floor.
Right.
So it's really important if one of them is in a committee that has this, because they have a little extra oomph, if you will, in the process. So that's why, if you wouldn't mind them saying what committees they...
Can I maybe respond to that query? The reason we're having this follow-up meeting is that Senator Hennessey and Representative Gauthier were unable to attend the August 23rd meeting. And at that meeting, we discussed that, for example, several of the items that were mentioned were indeed relative to municipal and county government issues, which Representative Gauthier is a member of. Also, we discussed that perhaps as a strategy perspective, it's very important that we have Senator Hennessey here, because you have set different rules. You have different procedures, so that the date sometimes is a little longer, and the method for submitting legislation is a little different. So Mr. Folter is correct that it is important for us to discuss that, but I want to say for the record, that's the reason we're meeting. So, thank you.
So, I know the people who were here on August 23rd were able to say what committees they served on. Perhaps we can just review that. Senator Hennessey was not here and Representative Gauthier wasn't. So if we go down the line quickly with what committees we serve on, or the committees you serve on, that would be most helpful. And then we can get to the 3 parts that I just referred to.
Thanks very much.
Representative.
Well, I
Gagnon.
serve on 2 relatively interesting committees. One is the Executive Department's Administration, which is a standing committee, and the other one is a thing called Performance Audit, which looks at the performance of state agencies.
My name is Francis Gauthier, Representative Ward 1. I serve on municipal and county, and right now I'm sub-chairing a committee on payment of property tax within the mobile home park situation.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I serve on the Public Works and Highways Committee, which deals with road and bridge issues, mass transportation issues. I also serve on 2 joint committees, the Long Range Capital Planning Utilization Committee, which sells surplus state property and leases of state buildings, and also the Capital Budget Overview Committee, which monitors and helps deal with the capital budget in between time, because it's passed once every 2 years. So it's like the fiscal committee, which does the operating budget. The Capital Budget Overview Committee, which is a joint committee, does the capital budget in between times every 2 years.
I serve on the Senate Judiciary Committee and on the Senate Health and Human Services Committees,
Great.
along with a number of different commissions and committees. But those are my.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your service. It's all volunteer. So, I know we briefly touched upon this, but if you could go to your sheet, which number 1 is the strategy for retained bills. Now, the bills that I identified on this one sheet may not be all of the retained bills that are of interest to Claremont. I'm not saying that that is a comprehensive list. I'm only saying that those are the ones that I was actively engaged in testifying. But what I would like to iron out as a strategy is, 1, the notification process. I know we look at the legislative bulletins, whether it's the House bulletin or the Senate, because we do understand that it's important for us to be present at these committee hearings for these retained bills. But we're all busy, so I'd rather err on the side of caution and request that if anybody is aware of a retained bill that's being heard by a committee between now and the end of December, if we could have like a group email address that just says, this is being heard on this date. I know Representative Gauthier just did this for one bill, and I don't remember the number.
Yes, it's House Bill 356. That was a bill that I had sponsored with a representative from Franklin about the freeze on the stabilization.
Yes.
Leaving us.
Yes.
Which was, it wasn't defeated, it was retained, and that's part of the 356.
Okay.
And the way I look at it is the email that I sent you is that the Claremont decision is being worked on. And what's very important is that the school board members, the city council members, and members on our delegation, state delegation, we attend that. The next meeting that's coming up is on Monday,
The 18th, yeah.
the 18th at 10 o'clock, and that's going to be at the LOB, which is the building right behind the Capitol, in room 209. That's a regular meeting. And they're going to be, so what, this right here is the most important thing, because you're able, these communities can come in and start steering the process right from the study committee. And this was signed by the governor, and it was passed by the House, passed by the Senate, and this is the reason why that's in the study committee.
Okay.
And I found out how important a study committee is, because I've chaired 2 committee meetings with about the mobile home park tax conundrum that we have clear across the state, and so all these entities have been coming into my committee and testifying before us, the committee, is that I run my committee a little bit different, where I am seeking information from you, the public, and the entities that's going to be affected. What would be good for you? And so we can craft something that's more fair and more equitable for everyone.
So that's a great example about if any one of us identifies a bill that's going to be heard in committee between now and January, can we just agree that it will be sent to the city manager's office and the city council, as well as the school board and the superintendent? I think those are the 4 main parties. And I think it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have identified, once we receive the notification, we identify who will be speaking at the committee hearing, if at all possible. I know sometimes that's not possible, but the more people we get there, but not so much just the numbers, representative of different elements of the community. That's what's really critical. So the more notification that we get, we can have a party, basically, of people that go before the committee and testify, and that we should have a commitment from both the city side as well as the school side to have some written testimony as supporting documentation. Do you believe that's the correct way to go about it, the best way to go about it?
Yes. Also, I'm going to be sending along all the committee members in that study committee and their contact information to everyone. If you can't make it there, make a phone call. If you can't make it there, do an email to them, to the whole committee. That has a lot of impact.
I wouldn't expect that from other people, because you can go on to New Hampshire General Court, find that information. I just want to make it as simple of a process as possible, the main objective being as much lead time. I know sometimes we don't have a lot of lead time, but you know as well as I do how long of a drive it is down to Concord. So that's good. All right.
But unless we are members of that subcommittee, we will probably only know the Thursday or Friday before the next week. That's probably the earliest we're going to know, and that's because of the House and Senate calendar. Does yours come out on Thursday night as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
The electronic version of the House calendar comes out on Friday evening, about 4:30, 5 o'clock.
I get mine on Thursday.
Yeah, I get
Get
mine
you
on
on Thursday?
I get mine on Thursday night
Oh, you
too.
do?
So
Yeah.
maybe yeah.
Yeah.
So we know that the longest lead we may have is, I don't know, the weekend, but
Yeah, that's about it.
But as long as we all agree that that's what we're going to do, whoever sees it first will make sure everybody else is aware of it. And then I'm really interested in any ideas that you may have as far as how can we broaden the support beyond our own community on some of these topics that we're very interested in, because they impact, it's not just Claremont that they impact other communities in similar situations, especially when it comes to the education type bills. So I think we have a mechanism in place, so it's easy enough to broaden our support to the county delegation as a whole. But that's not enough. That is, I mean, we have to go beyond the county. So I'm interested in any ideas you may have and how can we notify, more representatives. And it's not just about notification, it's about our reasoning why. Why is this important to us? Representative Gauthier?
What we have, the Republican side of the House has, and probably the Democrat side of the House has, we have a Facebook group there. So a lot of these things I advertise to them. Saying this is important to Claremont and small towns like us, who has a funding issue, who has a revenue issue. That these are the types of initiatives that would help, 2/3 of the part of the state. And I've been traveling through the southern part of the state. I've been 50 hours either in my office or on the road and traveling through the southern part of the state, picking up support for a number of my initiatives that I would like to bring forward.
The city of Claremont pays dues to the government center, what I used to call the municipal association. And they're an excellent agency. They're an excellent organization. They have their ears to, listening to what is the status of every committee in the House and Senate that have retained bills. Now, in my committee, we have some retained bills that we retain them just to be polite. We're going to kill them. They're not going anywheres, and the appropriate agencies who follow us know that. Now, there are some other committees that we have really other bills that we are truly, a workable bill, something that we can nip and tuck. I would strongly suggest the city reach out to the Municipal Association. Judy Silver is the director, and ask her, what do they know about the various retained bills that, the 4 that you've identified and any others? What is the status of them? What do they know inside? What's the inside information? They may know something that we, Joe Q. Public and representatives don't know, that aren't on that committee. So I strongly recommend that. What do you guys think? I mean,
I think it's important. And what about the New Hampshire School Boards Association administrators on that issue, especially municipal is important, Ray, but also you would think the
yeah,
school
that's
board,
right. If it's a
school
school-related
boards
issue, of course.
administrators would also.
If it's a school-related matter, Martha, is that how it works with you guys too, or?
Yes, I think it is. And as you said, if we're not directly involved with some of these issues, it's more difficult for us to identify them without spending time doing research about which bills are coming up and when, which we don't often know, as you said, until just about the last minute. So if there are other organizations that are sort of watchdog organizations, that would be very useful, I think.
I'd like to ask a question that's has a suggestion twist to it. It's about Claremont,
Okay.
specifically Claremont.
But to follow on this thought, so are you saying that if we have an identified list of retained bills that's important to us, that we contact NHMA and New Hampshire School Board Associations and let them know that these are of importance to us as well?
Yeah, see, these are
Okay.
retained bills we're really concerned about. We took a particular interest in. We, the city and the school district, taking a stand on it. Can you provide any updated information? Because that's really one of the updated information. And most of these are going to be meeting now, September and October, and they're going to have a report by November. Yep. So, now's the time. It's very timely.
Any other thoughts on that? Because I think those are good ideas. Do you think it would be helpful to them if whoever does that, I'm assuming I'll be doing some of it, attach any written testimony that we've provided to the committees during the legislative process?
Yes.
So you mean to the school board and municipal association?
Or ask them if if they like, we can give them copies. They may not want them right off the bat.
Right, I would just give them the option.
Okay.
You really want to know what the status is. What do they know? What's the inside scoop, more or less?
And what their recommendation is.
Yeah, and how should we proceed? And, and you might ask them, would you be available to help us? Because,
Okay.
yeah,
Excellent. And then I would imagine if we do that, then you would want to be CC'd, because again, we want to keep everybody,
That would be great.
okay.
And also, just in answer to one of the things you were speaking about earlier, is that, my territory covers both Sullivan and part of Sullivan and part of Grafton County. So if I'm hearing about things that are going on that let's say the New Hampshire Municipal Association's concerned about, I can also give that information to both Grafton and Sullivan. So that gives a little bit more of a range.
And I
Thank you.
think this wants to be shown as a bipartisan support
Mhm,
here
mhm.
in town,
Mhm.
not just a party thing.
No, can't be. Not if we're going to
It
get,
wants to be bipartisan.
yep. Okay. Good. Well, I think did you have
We're
anything?
done.
We're done with number 1. We have to go on to number 2.
Yeah.
So, some of these, so the next section is the new LSRs, the strategy during the legislative process for following those new LSRs. And on August 23rd, I had hoped to have enough time to, get a preview from you as to any LSRs that you may be introducing as an opportunity to educate us as well as the public on those items that you are trying to accomplish.
May I make a point that also would possibly
You have to go to the microphone, Bernie, but
inform this, and it applies to the bills. Not everybody in town, although people are learning, some people are learning about that LSRs is the thing that starts the bill process and turns into a red-blooded New Hampshire bill. And the word watchdog was mentioned earlier, and you spoke about watchdog organizations. Well, there are a few of us watchdog citizens out here in the community, and I hope there will be more. And if the watchdog citizens knew from the city website what bills or what LSRs by number you all are interested in or sponsoring, that would make it easier then to access the state government website, which is an excellent site, and plug in the number and then get the details of the LSR or the bill or so on. So, first of all, Madam Mayor, it's excellent that you have stimulated the process of paying more attention to Concord, which has not been the case in the past. So bravo for your
thank you.
bringing forth that we should pay attention to what's happening in Claremont as affects, in Concord as affects Claremont. But trying to flesh it out a little more, if we can, not just these organizations, but stimulate people in the community to, first of all, watch and then possibly participate, maybe we could get some more oomph that way as well.
Thank you, that's a great suggestion. Ms. Walter, as the acting city manager, can you investigate the possibility of a web page for that? That's great, thank you for that. So, on to number 2. Which is new LSRs, and so we'll lead with Representative Gagnon. If you have any, if you're introduced in any new LSRs, just a quick overview of what they are.
The only LSR I'm submitting is a bill that deals with reporting and addressing senior citizens and financial disclosure. So it's not really municipal related.
I'm working on I've just filed a couple of LSRs. The first one is it has to do with current use. I traveled through the southern part of the state. I talked to a lot of people throughout the summer, and I wanted to engineer current use at first. There's absolutely no support for that anywhere. Is rather hostile. Now, what I found out about LSRs, and I had a meeting with the DRA for a couple of 3 hours, whatever. He gave me an excellent presentation. We want to have the DRA here on November 13th, if you could do that. But what I want to do with this summer, this year with current use, is I filed a LSR that says we want to do a study committee on the negative impacts of current use upon small cities and towns, the 2/3 of the state of New Hampshire in the north. Now, I do have some support for that, even in the southern part of the state. That right there, I think that needs to be a bipartisan support between our delegation and Ms. Hennessey and the Upper Valley. I've also making provisions that if that initiative fails, then I'm going ahead with private investigation on the negative impacts of current use upon small cities and towns. I'm be meeting with a I would say he would be a rather intellectual person in the Upper Valley. I'm going to be meeting with him probably next week sometime, and I want me and him to get together and research and write a paper or a memorandum. So that would be the first time in history in New Hampshire that's been done in the last 60 years, since current use has sprouted up and just grown. There's all kinds of good information out there, how beautiful it is, how perfect it is, all that stuff. Nothing that impacts our city and our town here negatively.
I'm not probably planning to file any bills as a prime sponsor this year, but I have been working with a group of legislators, and I may co-sponsor some legislation to try to do more to encourage our schools, especially local schools, to do more to educate them, some of the students who might be interested about manufacturing, because I think we need to promote that more, because manufacturing jobs are good paying jobs. And part of it in listening and going to different events, that a lot of kids think the factories are still dirty, and a factory job is a dirty, crummy job, and the facts are, and I look at a lot of our manufacturing plants around here, they're modern, they pay good wages, and you don't need a 4-year college degree. You might need an associate's degree, and I've been very impressed with what River Valley has been doing, our community college, along with working with the technical centers. So I just need, among other things, try to get, and I can't give you many of the details because they are more expert than I am, but I think we need to encourage manufacturing and bring it back again, especially to a community like Claremont that in the past benefited from manufacturing and actually was a good, we created a good solid middle class thanks to manufacturing in Claremont. That's one bill. And then another bill is something to do more about wage theft, because there's a few unscrupulous companies that out that they're stealing money from their employers, or they're not paying overtime, or they're not paying holiday pay, and they need to be cracked down. And that's another possible bill that I'm working with a bunch of legislators on. So among others, and there may be a few others too, but those are the ones that I wanted to mention specifically.
I received an invitation via email, I think it came in today, from Wheeling for a guided tour. Have you received or
I
been
have,
through
Lovett,
Wheeling?
I would like to go to Whalen. I just have never had the opportunity yet,
Okay.
unfortunately, Counselor. Our assistant mayor now.
Yeah, make sure you get it right.
Absolutely, I don't want to forget that.
Senator Hennessey?
Yeah, we actually have several weeks longer to file LSRs. And I was trying to think, as others were talking, how to answer this. I have actually 3 or 4 ideas for things that I think I will be filing. There's a lot of discussion that I'm talking a great deal with some of the lobbyists from various organizations about when is the best time to file certain bills. And one of the options we have in the Senate is actually to file privately, so that we can get it going without necessarily having everybody else know what kinds of bills. And some of them are sensitive to the timing and what kinds of bills might be put out in almost a kind of retaliation. So I don't mean to be secretive. I'm not in the FBI, but I do have, I can't reveal them all at the moment because it's not clear what the best strategy is, and we're a little wary about what might be filed in opposition.
Lobbyist money out there.
Yeah, that's it. So, but one of the bills that is more benign that I'm working on is I've been asked to suggest that in order to receive a high school diploma, New Hampshire students would have been had experience with both CPR and how to operate a yes. So that all of our citizens, as they graduate, are able to save lives and use this equipment, which is becoming more ubiquitous. And I'm trying to think what some of the others are. I don't think any of the ones I'm looking at right now are specifically. So any of the others are specifically related to things that might affect Claremont directly. But I will certainly keep you up to date with how these things go. And I'm sorry to sound a little bit evasive, but I tend to speak out about things and then find myself in trouble. So I'm trying to, for those of you who know me.
Well, Senator, one of the things we thought that was important for you to be here is that one, you do have different set of rules, timing, and so forth, and also your area is much larger.
Right.
And we have agreed, or at the 23rd meeting, was that, the 4 members of the House from Claremont are not going to, they're going to do a much better job if they can find colleagues and people to partner with, obviously.
Absolutely.
So that's where I think is a key role. And if we could take the one dealing with current use, and my notes say that at the 23rd, the city manager, I think, is the person who made the announcement that 70% of the acres of Claremont are in current use. Yeah, which really affects our property taxes.
Yeah.
If your thing is, and then I'm not sure, but and this just says a high percentage of current use are out of state owners, so they're not even residents here.
What percentage did you say?
I don't know the
you don't
percentage.
know,
Just a
yeah.
high percentage is my notes.
It's about 3/4 of the 70%, the last I heard.
So it's a high percentage of out-of-state owners. Now, with all that said, and Representative Gauthier said that his ideas did not meet a lot of support this summer, is that is going to be a really heavy lift to change current use law. But we can do it and we can submit legislation, but it's going to be hard.
Or we could get baby steps.
We might be able to do that, yes.
The first thing we need to do is get a database of how it negatively impacts us, because there is that information doesn't exist right now as a cohesive document. That's what we need to go forward for the next 10 years. And it's
So-
going to be baby steps over the next 10 years, probably.
So would it be easier to us to file legislation, to have a committee to study the mechanism and the impact of current use on the state of New Hampshire and its New Hampshire economy? That might be the way to go. I'm just throwing that out. And study committees are usually easier to get through.
And that's what my LSR is, that I just filed it.
Oh, good.
Now, can I get you, the 4 of you on board to sponsor that with me?
Let me read the bill.
I'd
but
like to
sure.
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a study committee,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd have to look at, but I think in principle, yes, I would be in favor
The
of
trouble
it.
is waiting for the bill to come out to be read, John, is that a lot of these bills aren't in text until the last day
Right.
that the deadline
Right.
comes up. So basically what I'm saying is, it's a study committee. I don't think you need to know any more than that. Do you sign on with it or not?
I would say
To
yes.
make the point very clear. Number one, just as you said, a study committee. Number two, the study committee's purpose is not to do away with current use.
No.
It's to level the playing
It's to
field
study it.
between a Manchester and a Nashua, who I cannot believe are as affected as we are.
Yeah.
Right.
And one thing about current use that I want to say is that, you know, people from the upper part of the state pick on the big towns and cities like Manchester or Salem. There's one thing you have to remember. They might have they got a lot less land in current use, but the land that they have that's in current use is worth a lot more money per acre than it is here in Claremont. So they have a big impact also. They have a interest in this to a certain degree. Now, a study committee, I don't see where that's going to ruffle the feathers of anyone, because all it is a study committee, right? So you're not giving yourself political risk here for being attacked.
Right.
Right.
One of the things that
And believe it for me, I've been attacked plenty of times. It's not that bad.
believe me, I was attacked all last year. But so I'm quite familiar with it. But I also am aware of how people respond to the idea of more study committees and commissions. So my concern doesn't have to do with the fact that it's a study committee. I think that sounds like a great idea. But the fact that I may be asked to sign on to, 35 bills asking for 100 bills asking for study committees. So it would be really good for me to at least have information about what you've submitted to the legislature.
A good place for you to go and look at all my stuff is, do you have a pencil and paper
Yep.
there? I have a website that I just created. It's called activism443.wordpress.com.
Activism443 is all one.
Yeah. .wordpress.com.
Okay.
And I'll say it one more time for the public. Is my transparent website is activism443 wordpress.com. There's no at, no.
In this,
May I make a point about,
please don't interrupt, please. Let me get to, and then when I'll have you speak. But is it, because we know current use is such a huge topic and a lot of data is not yet available on it, it's a different strategy. I don't know if it's better or worse, but the other option I think would be to have a companion bill in the Senate come out of the Senate.
Right.
So is that the approach that you want to take?
Yes, what I was thinking about would be a companion bill in the Senate that would be a little tougher. All right? So if the tougher bill passes, that's great. If that doesn't, we have a chance with the weaker bill.
Well, may I just ask what you mean by tougher in terms of a study committee?
Well, you may not be a study committee. You
I
might
see.
you might pick out a current use. If you study it a little bit,
Yep.
come out with you have a current use problem, and go after that with an LSR.
Yep. In a little while, I'll know more about which bills are already coming from the Senate, and I don't know if there's one regarding current use, but
Yeah.
I would be very happy if there isn't to work on something that would.
I doubt there would be.
Yeah.
But Mary said something very important a few minutes ago about taking baby steps.
Yeah.
And maybe within the whole arena of current use, there is one particular item that you, the city, think
Yeah.
is key to opening that door, which could be that companion bill. That's the way I'm thinking, is that I don't know much about current use at all. I mean, I know people really like it. So I know it's going to be difficult, but if we could find one piece of that, and that could be the companion bill in the Senate, I don't know.
Something so that they aren't working.
Right, you're parallel.
Yeah. They
So
complement
they
one another.
complement one another is what I wanted to say. And I too need to learn more about current use. It's not an area I know a lot about.
Yeah.
Senator Hennessey, when does your window end for?
I believe it is October 4th. I have it, But it's in the beginning of October.
Put on the, just, yes, agenda, the city administration's input as far as what that baby step might be with regards to current use? You have anything on that?
No,
Okay.
no, that's,
Even
I like the
if
study
even if
committee.
there's one out there file, if you file, the Senate president or something will call you in and ask you to either buddy up with the other.
If they're parallel, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if they're the same thing, yeah.
So it's no big deal to file one.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So Senator Hennessey, what we'll do is after our 9/27 conversation, which is the next council meeting, we'll be able to provide the council's feedback as to what that first step might be, because we'll have an opportunity to hear from the city administration, and then that would give you the time frame that you need for your LSR window. Mr. Folta, I know you're dying to say something.
Yes, because this might all be moot in a way. And what I want to say is, and it's a question, because the last I knew, and I've never been a representative, but I've been in Concord, the process might have changed. And that is that this upcoming year, 2018, is the second year of a biennium. And that means there's an election next year and a whole new legislature in 2019. So in the second year of a biennium, a study committee could come up with a suggestion, but everything dies on December 31st, 2018, because a whole new elected legislature comes in on January 1st, 2019. What I'm getting at is maybe the time for a study committee is not in the second year of the biennium, but I've never been a representative, so I'd be very interested in learning if there's a, let me say, political consequence of interest in the process in the second year of a biennium. And also, Representative, I'm having a senior moment.
Gagnon?
Gagnon, very interestingly, made a political point, which unfortunately we don't talk politics, process politics. I'm not talking about party politics. I'm talking about process politics, and that sometimes retaining is a polite way of killing something. It's not a serious, I mean, it's a burial ground. So, let's not sweep the political realities under the rug, which there is sometimes a tendency to do.
Well, I think we understand that because we have.
Well, the
because-
community may not understand. What you understand, the community may not understand. You have an educational role as well, and I encourage you, because you have good information, I encourage you to teach us more.
It wasn't what I was going to say, it didn't pertain to me, it pertained to based on the actions of many people in this community that have fought very hard to get bills out of retained committees. We have succeeded. So, but your point's well taken. Representative Gauthier.
Just because a bill has been retained doesn't mean it's killed.
Right.
It all depends, what it depends upon is how much work I'm willing to do for my retained bill to move that forward.
Yep.
Through the summertime. The summertime, for me, is the most important part of the year, because it sets the tone for the beginning of the year at the State House. And the second answer to the second part of the question is that, yes, I've got a study committee, or I got study committees, let's say, and when a representative is working very hard to keep those bills alive for the forgotten taxpayer of Claremont, that's the best reason in the world to re-elect him again, to make sure he gets down there and works on his bills that he's been working on for quite a while.
And in an attempt to educate the community, the process is very open and it's very fair. So if a bill is in study status, all right, you're the commission to study current use and the economic impact on New Hampshire. then what will be is they will meet during the summer. They will meet into the fall. They will be mandated to come up with a report by November, right? That report will say thumbs up, thumbs down, do the basic findings that they want. And if they are so committed to this, this is worthwhile, then they can recommend that continue, or that go into consideration in the following new legislative session. So it doesn't just mean that, oh, it's a way of killing it. That's not what I'm implying. A study committee can be a very valuable tool.
The committee can extend beyond the biennium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, depending on how this, let's say this bill passes and a study committee is created, if it got right down to work next summer, it is conceivable that it could come up with some recommendations in time for the fall, recommendations that the next legislature could take up. Now, what will happen with those by the next, who knows? But they could propose new, so if it works, and of course, I don't know, it could be a big issue, so it's possible that they could start it, and then the only problem is they may not finish their report, so we'd have to file a new bill extending the commission the next term, and maybe they do something for 2020 session, for example. But who knows, depending on if the committee gets right down to work in the summer, of course the speaker and Senate have to appoint members if it's just a committee. Now commission, then you got all these state agencies involved. I would suggest a committee, just to keep it in our house and just welcome input from all the state agencies. If we can get down to work, and that's why, though, I think at any of the hearings for such a bill, we have a large turnout of people from the state, so that the committee, which will probably be municipal and county government, knows that the people want this issue thoroughly studied, and some communities' current use, the way it is now, is hurting them, you know.
It's going to be a very heavy lift. You know, forest services, people in that business, anyone that owns large tracts of land.
There's a vested interest for them not to have it.
They don't want this.
Can we look at some of these others, though?
Yeah,
Because some of these.
so we'll go ahead with that. I'm not saying that's, I don't want to be poo-pooing it. I just want to be very clear so that when somebody looks at the tape, you recognize that that is going to be a very heavy lift.
So the starting point is,
I'd like to talk, though, about the next one. Is I think if we could jump to the one about the downtown code enforcement and that whole piece. That to me that's a
the
winner.
receivership one.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So just to wrap it up before we go to the next one, you will be submitting an LSA for a study committee for current use, correct, Representative?
I've already done that.
Yeah, okay. And Senator Hennessey is going to wait for our feedback from our 9/27 discussion as to what baby step we can put in your framework of an LSR.
Yes, and let me just add, I just looked it up because I couldn't remember, but the first day to file for the Senate is October 12th, and the deadline is November 2nd, so it's later than I thought.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, we're on to receivership. Representative Gagnon. And for the public, we're going off, again, this is an extension of the conversation on August 23rd that we started, and that is when the city manager, Mr. McNutt, had said what he would like to see as an LSR is basically a receivership in which it provides a mechanism for the city administration to deal with absentee landlords who are not maintaining their property in accordance with local ordinances. Is that correct, Ms. Walter?
Yes.
So it's 2C on your handout?
It would, yes, yes.
I did a considerable amount of research on the receivership. I started in the spring. And I had the House researchers. They turned up a lot of information for me, and I read it through. And then I started trying to find some support, and I find out at the State House that there really isn't any support there. So for me, on my side of the aisle, it wouldn't be a good thing for me to file. It might be better for the Senate and for the Democratic side of the aisle to file that. And all depends what the bill says and how, you know, I could support that, but I need to see language on that one. And I impress upon you to press the drafting attorneys to come up with a language sooner in the process rather than later. Because you can't gain support without that text.
Were you, mind if I
Yeah,
ask?
sure.
Yeah.
Do you, what kind of feedback were you given about why you wouldn't be supported?
The way I undertake it, it's a big additive to New Hampshire law. Either the Republican side of the aisle and the Libertarians, they all say small government, small this, small that, everything small. And so you're going to be adding a big chunk of government out there. And what I found out, because I filed a bill last year, this last year, about local adoption of a sales tax, be a local option. That didn't get any support at all. It didn't even get any discussion at all. It was just a voice vote down at the committee after I spoke. Nobody there to defend it. There was absolutely nothing there. And I've heard the same thing about a local option for rooms and meals.
Yeah, Hanover did that.
I would say that would come with the same sort of thought process. You're increasing the taxes. You're adding to the size of government, and so that ain't going to fly too well.
But even diverting 0.25% they weren't interested in.
Yeah, well, in my website, and I've sent around a lot of information about how rooms and meals works, how it works. And right now, Claremont, we're getting a total of every year. We're getting out of that as a total. We're getting $685,000, a little bit more than that.
Do you know what percentage that is? Because we're supposed to be at 40%, isn't it?
Well, what that is if you look at my website, it explains all that.
Can we go back to where we were, which was on
The receivership thing, then we'll
Yeah.
move on to
Yeah.
that.
We're confusing this too, that's B.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not doing them in order, but, and I think Representative Gauthier is correct. If we frame the bill as looking like we're adding new regulations, then it's dead. All right? But that's not what I heard the city manager talking about. I heard the city manager talking about ability for municipalities to enforce regulations on absentee landlords.
Right.
That's-
Regulations that already exist, that are already on the books.
And so it isn't adding to the regulations. That's not what we're asking about.
It's authority
The,
and local
the
control.
bill is more of a local control issue, which your guys love. I mean, those are
Yeah.
buzzwords they love. And it's a local control issue, and it's enhancing them to basically, and I think that's going to have support, whether you're an absentee landlord in Lebanon or Franklin or Laconia or Dover or Somersworth or any place in the Manchester, Nashua, all the cities
They
are.
have to all have that.
They have to have that same problem. They have to have that problem. So I would guess that's something that we would, and then all the larger towns, you know, the Derrys, the London Derrys, the Salems, all those Merrimacks, all those larger towns might have the same problems. And I think that's how we have to frame it, not as adding regulations, but empowering the municipalities to enforce regulations. That's how I think it has to be done.
Sometimes even an enabling act, it adds a lot of regulations to the state and the size of government to state. And one thing that we do have in your favor about the receivership is that in mobile homes law, I think it's RSA 205A 17 and 18, I believe, is it states that I believe a town can go to court and get a receivership over a mobile home park that is degraded into a large degree of, unhealthy and unsafe condition. And it has a lot of power, and that's within the mobile home park law.
So maybe the question is, if it already exists in law,
And just there, But that's,
for mobile parks
you
can.
can use that as a precedent.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So do you want to have start this in the House and then have a companion bill in the Senate, or how would you want to proceed? Because we all know here in Claremont, this is a very important issue for us.
Except he's telling you it's not gonna fly with a Republican-sponsored bill.
Not if it adds significantly to the state
That's how they're
to the
gonna
state
perceive
government.
it, correct?
It could.
Yeah.
But we can make the case where it's not adding any regulation, it's just empowering us at the local level to deal with the issue.
It's how we take the time to
Yeah.
word the bill.
But the fact of enabling, they have to give an enabling act to you because you're not a home rule state here. And so they perceive that as just like they perceive my enabling act about a sales tax. And just
In this
like you
case-
want to reallocate 25%, and that adds to state government.
But
They
it-
can perceive this as adding to state government also,
Or taking away from their revenues.
or taking away from their revenue source. Yeah.
But in this case, this is enabling us to protect our property
Yeah.
and our valuation as a city. So it's really enabling us to protect ourselves as far as our valuation, which that has an impact.
But this is a very complex bill, and I think it has to be framed just right. And the people that help to write that are the municipal association. I mean, they're the guys who, they have lawyers on their staff, they have people in their operation who would help you, and they know the codes, the existing codes, and they would be able to say, these existing pieces of legislation are not being enforced because the lack of empowerment, the lack of enabling.
So once they help to draft something, then we could look for one of you guys for sponsorship.
Oh, yeah, and now, the LSR is not a big thing. It's really could be just 2 words, you know. I want to submit an LSR dealing with absentee landlords. It could be that simple, right?
So can we do that?
Yes.
And then we'll.
Right?
Yeah, right, and the lawyers can work, and if you tell them who, some suggestions for people to work with, they will work with it. Now, sometimes they'll still give you a hard time, but nevertheless, tell them some give them the idea, and then they can, the attorneys at the Bureau of Legislative Services can work with other agencies and get a list you want. I mean, and even refer them to the city. I don't know if the city manager has any language. It would be helpful if I was going to do it. I'd try to get some language from the city manager in advance, and go down there and say, ask if you've got some questions. Maybe I'd talk to the city manager of Claremont first, and then the municipal association.
And this has been working very well in Worcester, Mass. And Springfield, Mass. Massachusetts, it's an experimental with those 2 cities down there.
We can put in the LSR, but we can't go to the municipal association because the 4 of us are not members of the municipal association. And it's important that they have the technical knowledge on what goes into that kind of bill. That's what you guys can do, or you, the city. And that's important.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. We can save the LSR, but the meat of the matter is going to have to be handed over and say, okay, we'll work with you. I mean, we certainly, you guys, your city staff wanted to represent what you wanted to represent.
So Ray, are you going to put forth the LSR?
I would certainly do that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it
And
would
you
be
go back it up
important.
too?
Yes, I would be a co-sponsor.
And how about you, Francis?
Yeah, I'll co-sponsor
Because it's
it.
probably going to go to your
Yeah,
committee.
I'll co-sponsor it.
Don't forget Representative O'Connor, he wasn't able to.
Oh, yeah, I
Ms. Hennessey, you want to?
I was just going to say, I can also be a co-sponsor.
Yeah.
One of the issues that I'm dealing with now around LSRs is whether it's better to do it in the second year of this biennium or the first year of the next biennium
Yeah.
after an election. So
That's
it,
what Bernie
yeah.
was talking about.
yeah, and I think that's, for each bill, the answer is slightly different, but that's one thing to consider, is whether this would have a better chance should there be a change in the balance of
Yeah.
who's in the House or Senate.
Any predictions?
Well,
I
if
dare
you s-
not. I
if you
predicted
s-
before.
If you submit a bill in the first year of the session, then it cannot be returned the second year.
Right.
But if we
It
do it
can't.
the second year, we can do it
So,
the
but
first year
if
the
it does in
following.
the second year, you
That's
can
right.
always
It's a new game.
resubmit it for the new session.
You can have re-
Yes.
put a
So
return
that's,
on your-
that's the benefit of a thing. You know, but it's important that the municipal association people say, oh, sure, we will lend our expertise in really fine tuning that kind of bill.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the various codes that can or cannot be enforced.
LSR, when do you want that? When do we need to get feedback from NHMA, timeframe wise?
Well, ask them if they would help us. You
Okay.
know, that, you're gonna call them to do something, say, hey, we've got a litany of questions, and if they say, geez, that's a great bill, or they may even tell you, geez, you know, Jim Belangers, the chairman of Municipal County, is gonna submit a bill on that, you know, or who knows? I mean, that would be great news, you know.
Yeah, legislators sometimes tell you, and when I file a bill, I always done this to be very open. Somewhat don't, but I say I'm very open. Just keep it open, and if somebody else is working on similar bill, at least let's consult. And I don't know, maybe I can withdraw mine, or they can withdraw theirs.
Or you can work together.
Right, work together. And I think now our speaker wants the reps, he doesn't want a lot of bills filed that are very similar, so he's encouraging us to collaborate more. So even if we file it, there may have a bill already being filed or already have been filed.
Yeah.
So then we would probably, all of us here would work, I don't know, but then it would be up to the speaker whose bill is going to be filed.
I think there were 1,100 bills filed last year.
Yeah, something like that, right, yeah.
1,100.
Has Ryan put into writing any of the key points that he is looking for as concerns this topic?
If he hasn't shared it.
I've done a lot of research, and I talked with Mr. McNutt early in the spring about that.
Okay.
Okay, so I will take and load all that material over to you as soon as we have our email list all established with each other. I'll put that up there I'll forward all that information to you.
Okay.
And it's a considerable amount of information, a
So
lot.
on A, B, C, D, and E, we have an LSR on C.
And you have one on D as well.
And D.
And D, okay,
Yep.
that's a study, okay.
And you're contemplating a complementary bill in the Senate that would
Just, yes.
address that as well.
Right. So, Ms. Walter, we'll probably work together then on a letter to the NHMA, or do you want to take the lead on
Now,
that,
in the
or?
House, the Senate, the deadline is the 22nd,
Yes, I know.
which is Friday of next week.
Right.
So there is a time limit here.
Yep,
I don't know.
I'll talk with you after.
okay, all right.
And I'll
Moving-
wait till hear from you as to what the feedback was from the
Okay.
municipal association.
So we have strategy now for 2 items. Now if I may, this is totally new since our 8:23 meeting. Did you have anything more you wanted to say on that?
No.
Okay. So, as you well know, we have a community-wide effort with regard to the screening prevention of childhood lead poisoning. In that effort, the city had received a grant for technical assistance from the EPA, and we just had an event last Saturday for part of our neighborhood revitalization plan. We had like a block party, and it was an opportunity to provide information to members of that neighborhood about healthy homes and different issues on healthy homes. And in the discussion I had with the EPA rep that's been working with the city, he mentioned to me that over the years, funding for some programs that do impact the health of people living in various homes has been removed from the state, even though they may have gotten like 50% funding from EPA. One of the issues was that have sparked my interest was radon. And according to Eugene from the Boston office, he's the EPA guy, he said that the funding for the radon program was cut by the state, even though EPA provided 50% of the funding.
So the match.
The match. Mhm. radon is a big issue in New Hampshire because one of the sources of radon is contained in granite. And we have lots of granite. And radon happens to be the leading cause of lung cancer after smoking. So this is very preliminary. I'm trying to gather the data about how much it impacts our community. But if there's nothing else that we can do other than an LSR to restore funding or restore partial funding, or because there's two things, radon, he said, and indoor air quality. They have negative health impacts, and we have to figure out if we cut the funding from the state, are we really saving money if we're creating a lot of health care costs? I don't have the data. But my question is, can we submit at this point in time an LSR to restore some of that funding on specific programs, the ones that have the greatest impact on our community?
So when you restore funding, does that mean that if it passes, the state has to come up with the funding? Because my thing has always been is that if they restore one thing, they take it away from somewhere else. So I was always thinking about if you could get a dedicated fund to be able to fund that program or that match, whether it be from the sale of property where you take 5% or 10% of the tax stamp value or something to be able to start funding these kind of things. Because the state has a funny way of just keep cutting in someplace else in order to fund something. And I don't know whether that's an option or not, but it would seem like if we could take a dedicated amount of something similar to what they did with meals and rooms or the education tax, you know. I know they can change the law after it's passed, but, you know, at least you've got something
Right.
where you know that that's the idea of why you're doing this.
Could I ask a question about the state budget that may have a relevance on this? And this is an innocent question. I don't
Sure.
know the answer.
Quickly, because I know
Yeah.
we have a time limit.
I
And
believe I'm correct that the state operates on a 2-year budget,
yes.
that matches the biennium. So my question is, how much jiggling between approved budget items, because a budget has been adopted for this biennium by earlier this year, how much jiggling does the administration do among budget items during the biennium budget years, and how much opportunity or authority, whatever you want to call it, does the legislature have to jiggle within an approved budget? And the reason I ask the question is, if those options are limited, then maybe that's something that needs to be done in the next budget for 2019, 2020, not jiggling in the current budget if that's a difficult thing to do. So that's what,
Unless you're taking aside a dedicated amount from a pot. So if they were to
say that
pass-
again?
If the legislature were to pass authority to say 5% of this money is gonna go into this separate pot, I would think they would have, because it would be going forward, it wouldn't be off their budgeted, you know, their already passed budget.
Well,
they
if
would-
they pass the budget, I would think they have the ability to amend the budget any way they want.
Yeah, but I'm sure they don't want to.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Is it politically difficult to do that?
Yeah.
To do something like that in an already solid budget year?
Probably depends on the area that you're looking to take money from.
Well, that's right. I agree with you on that.
Excuse me, yeah, it is hard. It is because it's a 2-year budget, and a lot of legislators are usually loath to make major changes in the 2-year budget in the even numbered year. It's not impossible. I mean, if I was to file such a bill, I could probably, and maybe it might pass as policy, although there's still going to be arguments. What are you either going to cut, or which tax you're going to raise,
Exactly.
or which new tax are you going to implement?
Right.
And that's the same thing with the reinstatement of revenue sharing, which I don't know if we're going to talk about, but that's going to be an argument. So I am very sympathetic to this. I mean, I could file a bill, but realistically, it would be an uphill fight, and some people say, why don't you wait to the odd number year and then maybe put it in the budget? That's probably the argument you know, any of us who filed it would get. I mean, I'm think right now, but
Is there grant money available for something like that?
there might be,
The
there
grant
might
money
be.
is the match.
much
The
are we
match
talking?
is
The match, though.
The match is the part the state's not willing to come up with.
Right.
And, I mean,
I don't know, Senator Hennessey, I'm just starting my research on this.
Okay.
One, I wanted to do a couple of things today. I wanted you to be aware of that as our representatives, that these are health issue concerns. The EPA coordinator that sits in Boston, he says usually what we have at the national level is we have POCs at the state levels for various healthy home concerns, such as we may have a point of contact in New Hampshire for radon. We used to have a point of contact in New Hampshire for radon, and people who had concerns about radon within the state would go to that POC. I'm sure it was probably, well, I don't know about that, but there was a POC. I'm not sure where it was, what state agency. That's gone. So all of these calls are now going directly from the community to the national level, and it's not an efficient model. And so he said he would estimate in a year he gets 1,000 calls just from New Hampshire on this one issue. Now, any research I get, I will share.
Remind us,
Just any research I get, I will share with you.
Thank you.
It's just it dovetails so nicely with our community-wide effort to have healthy homes, healthy environments, so people can perform to their maximum capability. And if you're, through whatever reasons, or if you have people living in environments that are unhealthy, substandard, for whatever the reasons are, they cannot perform to their maximum ability. And we all lose. So I have a lot of questions with regard to this. I don't have any answers, but given the LSR timeframes, and knowing that an LSR can be put in the system with one or two words, and then you flesh it out,
Or it could go to study afterwards.
or it could go to study. But one, I wasn't aware of what's been cut and how this is working, the system is working.
Is the match the states needs to come up with? How many
Well,
dollars?
Senator Hennessey just asked that, and I don't have the answer to
let
that.
me just remind everybody that the New Hampshire House did not pass a budget. We could not pass the budget. We walked away, the House walked away from passing the budget. That meant the Senate, and then specifically the Senate President, pretty much wrote the state budget. Now, the Senate President has the votes to do whatever he wants to do with the budget. He believes that here's a set amount of money, we're not going to exceed that amount, and that's it. And we're going to live within our means. So I don't think the Senate President, and it's his budget, is going to support this. I mean, now, I have all the faith in the world in Senator Hennessey, but I think that is, that's not going to happen.
So
I don't see, I think the best thing we could do is to put this off till next session
so
and gather the information.
Ray, if a bill did come up, the House wouldn't have a vote?
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
that it's the Senate, what you're asking for is the Senate you're asking the state to amend its budget. Basically what you're saying is to amend its budget, either borrow it from from somebody else, create a new designated fund, whatever it is, you're changing the state budget. You're increasing the state budget. I'm guessing it's pretty hefty too. I mean, it's a 50% match,
Even if it's $1 million.
So all I'm saying is that, and you're going to have to ask the person who wrote the existing budget to kind of say, whoops, oh yeah, I made a mistake, I should have done that. That's not going to happen.
Something we tried to do all the way up to the end, and nothing happened. So I
Yeah.
think it's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
And of course,
Our best thing is to study that and to come up with all the facts and be prepared in
Right.
2019, 2019 to.
And
to
that's
reintroduce
fine
the
with
bill.
me. I mean, we can do some of that work at the local level and move it forward. The other thing is, the other idea that I want you to, consider or have in the back of your mind, we do have a commission on the lead issue, correct? So the other way we could also approach this is expanding the commission's mission beyond just lead poisoning and healthy homes in general, with a list of what are the hot topics that can impact a home from not being healthy. I don't know, that's another approach.
and my understanding is that, so today I had the first meeting of a commission that I instituted to study grandparents, and I'm learning that I'm pretty sure it takes legislation simply to change what it is that the commission is looking at. So you can't change the makeup of it, you can't change what it is they're studying without re-legislating too. So it's more complicated than I knew.
Relevant question, is it a commission or a committee?
Well, what I'm talking
There's
about
a
is
huge
commission.
difference, because a study committee is a creature of the legislature, whereas a commission requires a law to establish it, and it can go on as long as the law says it can go on.
I don't know. I thought that the one having to do with lead in water was a commission, but I could be. Yes, that's what I thought.
Commission, okay. When does it sunset?
Mr. Folta, please.
7 years.
Anyway, do you think it's worth pursuing that at all, or do we just sit tight and gather the data and try to attack it? Do we expand the commission, try to expand the commission's role through legislation, or do we just sit tight, gather the facts, and move forward at the next legislative session?
I think
I
it's
may not be the one who
bad.
knows most about this, but my own sense is that the water commission is, the issue is so big and so sensitive and so important that I would personally be a little bit reticent to try to expand it at this point. I also think this is a big, important issue, but I wouldn't want to water either down, no pun intended. But I think that's a group of people who've been working on the lead in water who can be rallied and brought into the fray and thinking about it and publishing things about it and getting it ripe so that it's ready.
I agree, that's why I thought.
Yeah.
Do we expand? But
Well, and those are the people who would really know if you talk to them. I mean, I can talk to Dan Feltus, for example, Senator Feltus, and see what he thinks about that. But that's my own instinctive reaction, is that we don't want to water either cause down.
I think you're right. That's what he would respond to saying. So I think what Assistant Mayor Damren said is, we'll sit tight, but we'll gather the facts. There's a lot to learn, and be ready to go full steam ahead at the next, in the 2000, what are we at, 19?
And that's gonna be the same thing with the reinstatement of meals and rooms. Those
Oh,
are gonna
yes.
be, I think you're wasting your time at this point.
Okay.
Better to
Yeah.
start with the next budget.
Okay. And then incentives for energy production. I know that was that was Councilor Pope who brought that up, and I don't know.
The state just barely cut energy production credits, because we are not gonna be able to get rebates that were in place last year. They expired.
Okay.
So,
So do we
Francis?
want to, yes.
What I would look at, instead of trying to sell your power, let's say you wanted to sell power on the open market, I would look at having a power station close to some sort of a power source close to the industrial area, and sell it directly to them. You get a lot better price. Plus, you'll be able to sell it to them cheaper, probably, than what they can buy it from the power company.
you can make the city a municipal power supplier.
No, you
Have
don't
us
have to make,
generate
you
our
don't have to
own.
make the city that way, is that you could advertise, like I said before, is advertise to the fact that somebody could come in, industrial entity, and produce power or heat or whatever, right, and sell it to the rest. Not the city. The city doesn't want to be in a power business,
No.
right? You don't want to be in any kind of business. It's bad enough being in the water business. But you have the railroad tracks, and you can put on the railroad tracks, you put those container cars full of compressed natural gas. You run it up to the manifold that's been on the ground and feed, and they could sell discounted power or discounted energy to all the entities down on River Road. And that's a way of selling yourself in the city here for economic development. Our taxes might be a little bit high, but we're working on them. But what can offset that is that we have this company that's came in or wants to come in to put in a natural gas manifold and hook up tanker cars with this cheap American natural gas.
I believe you can talk to Councilor Temple, but I believe when he was in Public Works, he was actually looking at, back when all the Kinder Morgan stuff was going around, about there was a company coming down from Canada about having that pipeline extend down here and having a drop-off point here. They were not interested at the time in doing that, but he could definitely give you more information.
But you don't need a pipeline.
No, they were going to bring it down on the train.
Yeah, but bring it down on the train?
Right.
And send it to the manifold, through the manifold. That's one thing. I would actively look at that. You have a new economic development person you hired, have her start looking at that.
Yeah.
Have her making calls. Start doing some advertising that way.
If I remember, Representative O'Connor kind of raised this issue along with Councilman Raymond and Scott Pope. But Representative O'Connor was saying that he recalled years ago some discussion about using the old paper mill as a way of generating energy,
Koi paper.
Yeah,
Right.
koi paper mill, yeah, as a way of generating energy. And he was saying, whatever happened to that? Is that feasible? And then I remember Councilman Raymond saying, geez, we keep hearing stories of windmills on Green Mountain. Is that feasible? And then Representative Pope had some thoughts as well. So, I mean, maybe I don't want to pass the buck, but maybe it's something that you need to look at. What reports do you have on your shelves around here that might give you some indication as to a course of action? Because those I thought they sounded like good ideas. I mean, I don't know if they're, somebody else could shoot it down and maybe why it didn't work, but those sounded like good ideas.
But why it didn't work 30 years ago? The
Yeah, the technology might make it change.
And then we just had a little while ago, we had the hot water district. It's the same thing. I don't care if you've got hot water in the ground or natural gas out, down a manifold in a certain area. It's the same thing. What you're looking at is reduced heat or reduced power, and then you have the wheelbarrow plant. You got generators in there. Why didn't he try to sell power directly to the bridge company?
The
So
windmills in Leominster generate an unbelievable amount of money for the town of Leominster. We, the county, actually get a big piece of that revenue.
Green Mountain's not on the same bridge, though. It's that one.
You
They
know,
go along
and yeah,
different ways.
so I don't know if does the technology change? And I think that's sort of something worth looking at, but I don't think it's ready for legislation. John?
I know we're getting close to the end, and I want to talk briefly about something under 3, strategy for following legislation that impacts Claremont, or future legislation, which I briefly want to touch on. Really an issue we haven't talked about today, our infrastructure, our roads and bridges.
Yep.
Well, next year, not to brag, my committee, and I think one of the most important issues we will take on is the update to the state's 10-year plan. It'll probably be known as House Bill 218. I mean, the previous 2 years ago was House Bill 216, 214, so you can almost guarantee that's going to be the bill number. And on my committee, I'm going to have a key role along with Newport Representative Virginia Irwin as far as trying to help Sullivan County. But the thing is, this particular bill, which by law, the chair of the Public Works and Highways Committee, and I think the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee has to introduce, starts with the executive branch. And next Wednesday, September 20th at 7 p.m. in Lebanon, Executive Counselor Joe Kinney is holding a regional hearing on the state's 10-year plan. I do not know why he hasn't scheduled anything for Sullivan County, like maybe either Newport or Claremont. I know in the past, he and the Executive Counselor for Charlestown, who it was Colin Van Oster, they made a deal where they'd have at least one Sullivan County meeting, but usually it was in Charlestown. And I'm probably going to talk to our I'm going to that meeting, and I'm going to obviously talk about it, and I'm going to ask Councilor Kinney if he could maybe, if possible, hold another meeting, if not in Claremont, at least in Newport. Because it's too bad, we ought to have at least one meeting to get local input. Now, also too, we have the Upper Valley Regional, and that's I don't know if they've consulted with you about, or if you consulted with them, because they're supposed to work for you about your ideas for transportation improvements that should be added, okay? And these are things that should be added. There's some of the stuff that, like the renovation of North Street is already in there. That will not be affected, but future things that you want for the roads and bridges in the Claremont area, and also the transportation. This affects our airports, our bus service, our ports. It's also a chance to maybe push for more money for transit, like rail, like bus service. And it's going to be a big, major bill, I think, next term. And I'm going to be involved because of my committee work. So I just wanted to bring that attention. I don't know if anybody else can go to that hearing next Wednesday, September 20th, 7 p.m. in Lebanon, but I will be there. And I just think, you know, I think the voice ought to be heard. And I'd like to have another meeting, preferably in Claremont, but even if we did it in Newport.
Where in Lebanon?
At the City Council chambers, I'm sorry, if everybody knows where that is.
I have some information on that. As a former Claremont commissioner to the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission.
Real quick, because I need to wrap it up. I know Senator Hennessey had a time limit. Real quick.
The Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission, in a contract with the New Hampshire Highway Department, runs what is called the Transportation Advisory Committee, fondly known as the TAC. Everything is coded now. The TAC includes, it's a committee, and there's a Claremont representative on that committee, namely, well, it used to be Bruce Temple, the DPW director. I presume it's DPW Director Scott Sweet now, who had a hand in drafting that 10-year plan, which the Regional Planning Commission then served up to the Highway Department, which is now going to be serving up to the legislature. So there is already a link, I don't know how active that link has been, to the Transportation Advisory Committee of the Regional Planning Commission, which has formulated whatever's going to be served up by the Highway Department to the legislature. So hopefully, Claremont has been represented at meetings and given input and so on, but the city manager perhaps should verify that.
Thank you for that. So what I want to do is I want to wrap it up, because I know it's a Friday afternoon and people have they forewarned me that they have limited time today. So I appreciate once again everybody's time to wrap up. The city manager, acting city manager had to leave as well at 5 o'clock. So as far as the energy, incentives for energy production, I know at the council, one of my agenda items that I want the council to discuss is whether they will vote to enact either an energy commission or an energy committee, whatever. So that discussion will take place in the near future. We'll take your recommendations as to we need to do some work at the local level. But however, if during the legislative session you see any bills that pertain to incentives for getting people to do things in our communities with regard to energy, that would be most appreciated, because as we know, energy expenses are huge and it's a detriment both to residents as well as businesses. And then in part 3, Representative Cloutier mentioned and I have identified what I think is important to our community, and that is state funding support. As you know, we've had it whittled away, and we are at, Senator Hennessey, you don't live here, just so you know, we are now the community with the highest tax rate in the state. And even though people will say, well, that's not the same thing as tax burden, which it's not, we also have a medium income that's less than the state average. So at the end of the day, it is hurting us. And we need state funding support.
We don't need it taken away.
Right.
We
I
certainly
was
need
on
more
record as
of
getting
it.
as much support for Claremont as possible. It's all
We
on
are-
public record, my vote.
We also need infrastructure support, even if we were above average for the state medium income. Our infrastructure dates back to some places the 1800s, and we do not have enough population base to support some of the infrastructure improvements we need to make. So anything along those lines would be most helpful. And of course, any economic development incentives. As you know, the council did approve the 79E economic development tool. We are looking at current legislation as to the pros and cons of property tax exemptions for new construction. And we have TIF districts, but we are very limited as a state what tools we can use for economic development, and yet we're competing with the rest of the region, the rest of the nation. So, and finally, healthy homes, you know, is a hot topic for this community. And any ideas that you have, all of you have, moving forward, how we can expand our support for these issues that are of importance to Claremont, we're very open and receptive to those ideas. So I thank you in closing for all of your time on a Friday afternoon. You're all volunteers. Is there something that each of you would like to say in closing?
I would just like to say thank you very much for bringing us together. This is extremely helpful. And I hope you will continue to keep us in the loop as things progress. Luckily, my son didn't, and his wife did not have a baby yet, so I was able to be here. But next week it will happen one way or another. So, but really, it helps me enormously to hear directly from you about the kinds of issues that are of most importance, both immediate issues and down the line. So, thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and Mr. Assistant Mayor, for having this meeting. I think it's helpful for us to better understand where you're coming from, what you are concerned about, and my only thing is to make sure to keep us in their loop. If there's a bill you think we should support, even maybe sign on as a co-sponsor, depending on the timing, or a bill that we should oppose, we need that information. We need that, because sometimes I'm down there, I'm wondering, I see these bills and I figure it could impact us, and it said, what's the city's position? And I don't know, so I have to make the best guess possible, and hopefully I've been right most of the time. But I'd like to know more the city's thinking. One example was the bill that would have given increased exemptions, for veterans. A very popular bill, but there was another side. It was going to result maybe in increase for other sections of a municipality. But I struggled with that, and I voted one way, but I wished I could have heard from the city on how you feel. Of course, it was an enabling measure only, but things like that. So I think we've got to get better communication between the city and the school district and the legislature. At least let us know how you feel. In the end, we'll have to make a decision. But the more information I have, I think, and I think I can speak for everybody, I think the more effective we can do our job in representing the citizens of Claremont.
And thank you for the meeting and organizing all this. And what's important here is that sometimes we're going to have to cut across party lines, right? Now, this last year, I cut across party lines and caught a lot of flack and a lot of attacks, right, for that. But what we need to do is sometimes we need to cut across party lines, and that's that. That's how you're going to get this. You're going to get legislation that's important to us to be passed. Bipartisan support.
So just as a reminder, I agree with everything that's been said. the LSR that I will submit dealing with enhancing municipalities' ability, I'll do that once you let me know if the municipal association is willing to help us craft the legislation.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, this concludes the workshop for today, and once again, thank you for your time on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks for having me.